successful in life, successful in love, successful in finances are ones that embrace failure and look for the lessons. They're brave enough to step into that energy they're being called to do and not to step away. I know that's what I'm currently being challenged with is like, okay, there are safer places than running a business, but, financially, but, can I stay with it? Has God called me to do this? So, hey, I trust you, Lord. The more you love yourself and accept God's grace upon you, the more you can give God's grace upon others. The perfect thing about areas of growth, as you focus more on that particular thing, you become an expert at it. You become a person that does. The people will say, hey, you really see me, you really hear me, you're really there for me. You begin to have that reflected to you. Hi, and welcome to episode 15, The Miracle of Giving, Acts of Service and Divine Love. We're on the Unlocking the Miracles Within podcast here with your host, Jeffrey McDonnell. I'm so happy to be here. I hope all of you had a wonderful holiday season, and you've had a happy new year, and you're starting off 2026 with great excitement and appreciation for what has passed. I wanted to have this episode around this season in the new year because, we just come off the holidays. There's generally a lot of giving and receiving during that time, and I don't know if all of us are locked in or centered on what that means from a spiritual perspective. So I don't know how long this solocast is going to be. You'll only have me here today, but hopefully we'll cover some good ground and give you some good tips. And we'll see how long God has this show last. Typically my shows are 15 minutes to an hour, sometimes a little more. This one to me is still a journey that I'm learning. That's why I want to share with you, but it's also something that I think is fairly straightforward. And it's our human nature challenges us in this space a bit with giving as God gives to us, as God hopes that we give to others. But, it just requires being vulnerable and opening your heart and trusting. And those things are tough because the world hasn't given us that many opportunities to feel trust, feel vulnerable, feel intimate, and be safe doing that, right? The history of humankind has not been kind to that energy, but it's still the energy that we need to play in to bring in the abundance of not just money. I think a lot of people look at this as a money thing or giving as a money thing, but the abundance of really having connection with others, really having an intimate relationship with those that are around us, which is I know in my heart of hearts, that's what we all yearn for. I know that's what I yearn for. So let's get started a little bit. I just wanted to share with you, there's so many places in the Bible, and as you all know, my grounding is in Jesus Christ, but there's so many places in the Bible that talk about giving and the power of giving from God's perspective, from the universe's perspective. So I want to share a little bit of that with you because there's quite a few that I found. I'm sure there's more that I didn't find. But so in Proverbs 11:24-25, one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. Boy, that's so profound. And again, it's not just about money. It's, that a generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. And to me, what that means is that you're really giving your attention and your time and your energy to that person, really listening to that person, really being present for that person. And that's been the biggest journey for me. I'm a problem solver by nature. I always want to fix things. And sometimes you're too busy thinking about solutions and you're not really listening and paying attention. That's probably one of my biggest faults for much of my life. But you know what the great thing is about having areas of growth? The perfect thing about areas of growth, as you focus more on that particular thing, you become an expert at it. You become a person that does. The people will say, hey, you really see me, you really hear me, you're really there for me. You begin to have that reflected to you by God, by the universe, through others. Let me give you another verse here. 2 Corinthians 9, 6 through 8. Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. And God is able to bless you abundantly. I love that. God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. So, if you're not sowing the energy of that trust and that level of abundance, planting the seeds that you know will grow because they're the right seeds. I'll say this, the way this comes through to me is I feel it. I might jump to, hey, what is the outcome of this action? But it's almost like in that moment, you know that action is the perfect thing. And you got to be okay knowing that wherever it leads is perfectly okay. And that takes a huge amount of trust. I know with the last company that I ran, it was just a few months into that role. And when I came in, they were really struggling. And I couldn't understand why God brought me to that business, because I came from a large corporate world, not to a small company business. And what did I know about running a small company, a family business? And I know God brought me there to teach me a lot of things, to yeah, always humble me in a lot of ways. But in the first few months, I had such a vision of what success was in my world that I was afraid that I would mess it up, that I would fail. And it was all around my vision of my success, my vision of what success is, my vision of expectations. Even though I was giving all of my heart and I was doing it from planting the seeds from the best of places with everybody that I was around, I still was holding on to the outcome. And I wasn't trusting in God. And I remember saying at that time, when I had my little epiphany, I said, I got to be okay failing. If that's what God wants me to do, I used a few more choice words than that, but I got to be okay failing. I got to be okay. If that's what God brought me here to do, I put my best foot forward. And if I'm meant to fail, there's always a lesson in failure. Then that's what's going to happen. And I got to be okay with that. And I don't need to be carrying the burden. I need to give it to Jesus. And when I began to do that, the company began to turn around. And it wasn't really, I don't want to say, what, yeah, of course, it's you do stuff, you work and you do stuff. But I want to say I can't really attribute that to the doing or the people that came across my path. It became more as I began to trust people came across my path that helped the business. And I began to follow and trust my instincts a lot more. And I think we're challenged in doing that. I went through this journey, and I actually ran that company for 8.5 years. And towards the end, I felt that call again, that challenge to expand and to grow. And there was a part of me that wanted to be safe there and didn't want to fail. And the jump and the challenge was to start this business. And I still go through those challenges every day. Hey, is this going to work? Is it not going to work? And I got to pull myself back and trust in God. Well, how does this have to do with giving? Well, I believe that when you're giving of yourself, you're giving of your time, of your energy, of your knowledge, and of your expertise, and you're doing it without any expectations of having anything in return other than the love, other than you're giving the love of the Creator to others, then God's the one that uplifts you. The God's the one that turns this exactly what it said here in Corinthians. I'm sorry. Yeah, that was Corinthians. And God is able to bless you abundantly. Wow. Listen to that. God's able to do anything, right? And I don't know the original Hebrew or Greek or anything that was written in. I'm sure it was in Hebrew originally. But God is able to bless you. What does that mean? That means when we don't allow that, we're closing the door on God. When we don't try to hold and control things and control the outcome and to put our expectations on it, and we give that all to God with our best earnest, our best energy, then God is able to bless you abundantly in whatever way that God wants to bless you in. That's the thing, right? Boy, I'm so glad I'm doing this now. Like I said, we come out of the holiday season. I'm, putting my best foot forward. I judge myself. Am I always putting my best foot forward? Not perfect, but I'm putting my heart forward and my best foot forward on this business. And I worry, hey, am I going to be able to do this? Am I going to sustain? Am I going to be able to bring this business to a profitable business, and supporting my wife's journey with her books and her coaching, and supporting my journey in this show and my cooking show that's coming up and my books? Am I going to be successful, or am I going to fail? And the lesson there for me is, you just got to give it to God. Wherever it goes is perfectly fine. And it's just a perfect lesson for me in this moment. That's why these shows come at the timing they do, for that purpose alone. Another Bible verse, Acts 20:35. It is more blessed to give than to receive. Probably those of you listening to the show are probably a lot like me. You're givers. And you give, but you have a hard time receiving. I know that's me. I have a hard time allowing receiving love, receiving recognition. I diffuse a lot of that. I can be self-deprecating, I guess, is the best word. I use that a lot as humor with folks, because I've always wanted to caution myself and be humble. But I also think there's even more humility in allowing yourself to receive. When you get a compliment, when you receive a financial blessing, when somebody recognizes you, that you've been there for them and you touch their heart. I've been trying to do a better job just saying thank you and allowing that energy to come in. Yeah, I've been trying to do that. And I think the Bible's saying, hey, it's better to give than to receive. Well, that's true. But I also think we need to allow ourselves to receive God's love so that we can give more of it to the next person. So I'm not saying the Bible's wrong. It's not what I'm saying. There's more to it, right? There's more in the Bible than just that one parable. But I think clearly, if you're in the same heart space I am, I'm sure you probably are listening to the show, You love to give. Boy, I love to see people succeed. I love to see people prosper. I love to see people feel in bliss, be excited, be passionate. And on the same flip to that, to allow that to occur, you need to be able to receive passion, excitement, and just getting in the energy of that. That's important. So I'm learning the latter part of that. I think many of us who are in service or problem solvers or who genuinely love to see others succeed tend to give up our own needs. And I got to constantly remind myself, and I hope I'm reminding you all, that the more you love yourself and accept God's grace upon you, the more you can give God's grace upon others. I think that's an important one to giving. You know, when we give to people, I'm going to share this. I think it's important to bless whatever you're giving. So if you know, for example, that you're giving time to someone and you're just going to spend time with them, pray before you do that. Pray that, Lord, help me to be present. Help me to be the ear that they need and maybe the voice that they need. And my highest good and their highest good and everyone's highest good, let me be honest, true, and integrity and fully present with them. If you're giving money to someone in need, you see a person that has financial need and you're aware of it and you have the means to do it, you're not feeling like you're sacrificing your own well-being, and you give that money, bless that money for them, that it serves their highest good. Instead of being fearful that they're going to do something wasteful with it because you have some kind of history with them or some kind of judgment. Maybe it's a homeless person and you begin judging them, but God calls your heart to give them some money. Bless that money and give it to them. I think that's important. And I remember one time and by the way, folks, this is a journey for me. I've always been, my heart's been called to help people that are struggling. And sometimes I have the money and sometimes I don't. But all that judgment creeps in. Like, are you going to really be responsible with that money? Boy, I fight that all the time. But when I do, when I really step into God's grace, I remember a homeless man, Jules and I were heading out to dinner and I was walking down the street and he had asked me for money. And I might be telling that story a little wrong. I think he came up to me and I thought he was going to ask for money, but he actually asked for a hug. And I knew I was supposed to be there. I could feel God there, and I gave him a hug, and he was just so grateful and so appreciative. And I did give him a little cash too. That's what happened. But what I remember was, wow, I was so on guard. I guess that's the normal thing to be. Even though I knew God was calling my heart to give him a hug. So I try to be very aware, and I'm talking anybody that approaches you, jump up and hug them. But having a sense of God in you is it's a very specific calling. When you know it's right, it pulls you like a magnet to that moment. I remember Julie doing the same thing to a homeless man on the side of the street. She had me stop the car because she just felt God's pull, and she ran up and gave him a hug. And, a lot of tears in that moment. So when God calls you to do things, it doesn't have to be a homeless person. It could just be being present with your child. It could be being present with a friend or a loved one. It could be answering that call when you may be a little too busy. And there's so many stories of how powerful that can be. Maybe when somebody's really struggling and you take that call and you listen to them, and it ends up saving their life because they feel like somebody really does care about them. I think in this world today, we're missing way too much lack of intimacy, lack of availability, a lack of truly sharing our heart. I think technology in a lot of ways has done that to us. I called it castrated an entire generation of young men with the focus on games and those kind of things, because we get ourselves so distracted we can't really be present with the other person. So again, we're all on this journey together. Nobody's perfect, but there's things to kind of reflect and contemplate on. From Matthew 25:40, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. And that's Jesus talking. So if you can think of it that way too, that when you're opening your heart, you're really being present, you're really giving. You're giving that love, that presence, that time, that energy to Jesus. And he said it right there. I like that. Because Jesus really, he saved my butt, as you guys all know. In episode 1, I talked about it. So just that energy, boy, just that energy of unconditional love and a presence. As I said, the purpose of this show is just to give a sliver of that. That's what I want to, that's my mission in life, is to learn how to do that more and more, and to hopefully walk in his footsteps more and more, and give a little bit of that to others. Give a little bit of that Jesus in me to the Jesus in them. 1 John 3:17-18. If anyone has material possessions, sees a brother or sister in need, but has no pity on them, how can the love of God be in that person? Dear children, let us not love with words or speech, but with actions and truth. Boy, that's a good one. And as I was going to say, and when you feel moved by God, it's not always about one thing. It's like, oh, you have to give XYZ money, but you need to give whatever God's calling you to give in that moment. You need to be available enough in whatever moment it is. Okay, God, what do you have me here for? Back to episode 1, what recalled in my memory was that moment that Jesus visited, and I came out of that, and I fully was aware I was in the psychiatric ward, and I turned the corner, looked in the mirror, and saw myself, and I could have been dejected, defeated. I could have never left that room, but what I did when I looked in the mirror and I saw the different man I was, again, you want more of the story, go to episode 1. I said, God, you have me here now. What do you want me to do? I think we need to say more of that when we're wherever we're at, a challenging situation or a great situation. God, I'm here. So what do you want me to do? If you're in a challenging situation, God will come in and help you. If you're in a blissful situation, God will make sure that you're present for those that maybe are not at your level of bliss. And maybe, or just, take it to the next level, right? Because I remember vividly after I said that, and I walked out into the lobby, the people they just were all gravitating to me because they wanted to talk to me about whatever it is they felt to me. And I could see into their souls, and I could see they were hurting, and I did not feel worthy to be there for them. But God called me to be. And I thought to myself, well, what if this whole experience was for me just to be in the psychiatric ward, these folks that are really in need, just to listen. And that's what I did. And it was a beautiful and amazing experience. I wouldn't trade that for the world. Luke 6:38. Give, and it will be given to you. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. That's interesting. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you. To you. So I think that's talking about you're given these gifts, you're given these graces, and you're given these abundance, and how much do you use that in acting, planting those seeds of love, actually using it for what a God intends you to use it for, and not wasting it. Boy, I've wasted so many things in my life. It just has me reflect on. I thought it was all about me. That's another topic there. So let's make everything about God. Of course, we know we're supposed to put God first. That's one of the top commandments, right? Jesus said. But put him first in all things, and using our gifts. Like, Lord, where do you want me to use my talents today? Where do you want me to put my energy? Where do you want me to put my focus? How do you want me to be a good steward of the gifts you've given me? And stop making it about us and our ego and what we need and what we want. That's a good one. One of the things Julie and I have been trying to do more, we need to do it more, is to do a conscious effort of putting God first in our spouses. So a lot of times with your spouse or with a significant other, there's always this partnership, a give and take. That's not a bad thing. But we make decisions based on our needs and their needs, and instead of going to God first and say, okay, how do I bring Julie, for example, in my life closer to God? How do I bring those others that are in close to my field, my children, my parents? How do I, when I step forward with them, how do I open the doorways to God for them, and make God the priority and not me the priority? And in Julie's case, to do that for me, and take our marriage even to a greater level of love and connection and respect, because we know where it all comes from. Anyway, that's interesting how that whole phrase brought that whole verse in the Bible brought me that thought, which is, for with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So use it wisely. Hebrews 13:16, and do not forget to do good and to share with others, for with such sacrifices God is pleased. That's the Old Testament. They say it a little bit differently, don't they, in the Old Testament? But when we say do good, I think when you're doing God's work, it is only good work. And when you're doing it with the best of your intentions and your connection, and you're being aware that maybe even sometimes the best of your intentions are not in alignment with God, but you try. God is pleased, because God's going to continue to grow you, elevate you, expand you in ways that you can't even imagine. There's one more I'm going to share with you, and then we'll step away from the Bible verses for a bit. But Galatians 6:9 and 10. Let us not become weary in doing good. Therefore, as we have opportunity, let us do good to all people. So again, it's very similar to the verse before, which is, when we say do good, think of it as, I'm doing God and doing God's work. I'm conscious that my ways, I may not have the perspective that God has on a particular situation. So I need to open up and ask for help. Let's step forward, be brave enough to step forward and do good. But it's not my perspective of good. It's God's perspective of good. There's so many instances in the world and in life where we think we are the one that knows that we are the righteous one. And we even do things for people sometimes because we think we're doing good, but they don't want it. It even offends them, or feels like we're smothering them, or whatever. I think you can probably say every human being has been guilty of that. So, how do you do the work of God, right? How do you do God's good work? I believe you do it by listening, choosing to see the God in that person, whether you like them or not. And then, when called to act from that space, maybe it's that person's call for help. Maybe it's just being there for that person and responding in the right way. You'll know when you act in accordance with God because you'll see the fruit of that work, that effort, that focus. You'll get it back tenfold, as it also says in the Bible, because you're doing it from the space of God. Now, I can't say giving's always easy because sometimes it takes you to be brave to do it. And what I mean by that, it could be giving of yourself or giving of your time. We think of giving as like I'm giving money or I'm giving gifts. That's easy. But are you giving money or are you giving gifts with the highest of intentions with that? Are you giving your time, your presence, your heart, your mind, and everything that you are with the highest of intentions, with God as the leader? How many times do we stop and breathe and say, okay, God, what really are you calling me to do here? You calling me for me to give that hug to a stranger? Well, that feels uncomfortable. I don't feel safe or whatever that is. And trusting that that's exactly what is needed in that moment. We have so many amazing gifts as human beings to really be present and be compassionate and to really, really be there for others, to really be available and intimate to others. We also have the opportunity to buy our way out of intimacy by throwing money at someone or gifts at someone and saying, "Well, that demonstrates my love for you," but the other 99% of the time you're just not there for them. So my dream or my goal in life is that I just continue to learn intimacy, to be more intimate. I think when I was a child, I think this happens to most folks. One, you grow up. I have wonderful parents, but I think we all grew up searching for that intimacy that we came from. We came from God. We came from this perfect level of being known and seen and intimacy. We come into the world, and then there's times where we're ignored or we're misunderstood, or we feel abandoned for whatever reason, and we grow up kind of jaded. Comparing it against that perfect love that we were born into nature with God. And we don't learn, we're not taught, we're not guided to the brokenness of the world, and we seek intimacy through other means. You can just see it, the abundance of pornography in the world, the objectification of sexuality, women primarily, but it's men and women. Not to get into the politics or anything of that, but that is all born out of our need to seek intimacy. And it's distorted, right? Because that's not real intimacy, but it's what is shown to young minds, to people that didn't learn how to have an intimate relationship. I don't say that's everybody, but I would say there's a lot. I know me. I was one of them, right? I remember my first impression, I know I've shared this before, was I was exposed to pornography by a neighbor friend at the age of 6. I mean, that should never happen, right? But you didn't know what to. My parents said no. I didn't even know how to interpret something like that. but it definitely has an impression on you. Oh, that's how relationships are supposed to be. They're supposed to be objectified, or some sense of power dynamic in the relationship, or sexualization of whatever. Um, and we don't do a lot of that, teach a lot of that in education. So I've been kind to myself as I've kind of grown up, and I realized a lot of this, that okay, so my ability to receive, or I would say, um, to give and receive in the grace of God, was impacted by my um, misunderstanding or misappropriation of the energy of intimacy, and really trying and being available for other people. And I think that's why, not that I was a bad husband or a bad person or a bad father, none of that stuff. You can't beat yourself up about this stuff. But I believe after Jesus showed me what real love and real intimacy is about, like he knew every aspect to me, and there was no judgment, that that's the imprint that I went, oh, I want more of that. And I want to learn how to give and receive with that, with no judgment, with no expectations. I want to be more like Jesus. It's a great thing to aspire to, I believe. And so to do that is a different story. You begin to unwind. That was 14 years ago. I've unwound a lot of things, a lot of expectations, a lot of misunderstandings, a lot of misappropriation with energy that I have. I'm still on that journey. I think we're meant to be on that journey throughout our whole life. I mean, if the destination is we model all of Jesus, then guess what? We're in heaven, right? We're not here. We're not in school still, learning how to be back with our God, our Father, our Creator, Jesus, His Son. We're you're done. You're not here. I believe that firmly. I believe the only reason we're here in this world of dichotomy and separation and sin, and our nature of sin, and the Bible takes it all the way back to Adam and Eve, and the poor decisions they made at that moment. I think we would all make those, probably. That's part of who we are. But I also think God sent Jesus down to show us the way, and we're meant to step into that. And we're not meant to be perfect, but we're meant to, as it said in these Bible verses, to do good things. And when I say do good things, do God things. To put our best heart for it, the best step forward with that. So I think before I leave you all today, and I appreciate you staying with me and listening to this, and I hopefully much of this has made sense, because again, I just let things flow through me, so it's not planned by any stretch of the imagination. I do like, though, to give you some takeaways, the things I've learned in giving and receiving. So I'll start off with I always try like three things. I don't want to overcomplicate it, so I'll try to do three good things here. The first thing is set your intention. I always say pray on everything when you're giving, and when you're receiving too. But set your intentions to say, God, let this be about you first and foremost. Let me be available as you want me to be available, and let me act in accordance with you. And if you ever fall into a space of being unsure, just stop and pause and say, hey, Lord, tell me what this is all about. You can tell when you need to pause, because you'll feel resistance. You'll feel uneasy, unsure. You might feel fearful or worry. All those things I share with you before that are not of God. Just stop and pray on it. Pray before you go in to meet with someone. Pray before you go in to Pray for God's guidance when you go in to spend time with your family. I do every time before we go spend time with the grandkids, because I just really want to be present with them. I want them to remember, I want them to see the God in me so they seek the God in themselves. I see myself as a mirror to them of unconditional love. And I hope they feel that. And, I'm sure I'll get better at that as they grow or continue to grow myself. But that's my true desire. So that's the first thing. Pray. I could say pray, 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 pray. Pray. The other second thing is this call to action. And I know sometimes that can be uncomfortable or uneasy. If God calls your heart, for example, to give money to a homeless person, or to give a hug, or to step out in your church or in your community to do something that is good, or that God calls you to do, you can't always, if you feel fearful and worry and unsafe or whatever it is, you can't always assume that's not the right thing. It could be, but just take a pause for a moment, take a beat for a moment, and ruminate on that, and pray on that, and ask God, and give it some time, because either the call to action will be greater than the fear. You'll be like, okay, I'm just afraid because in my past I learned this pattern of not putting myself forward, not shining my light for God. But if you can remember that, like, everything is God and God's design. It's not about you, really. And so you put it forward, and if you fail, like I said, when I was in the job running the company, I was afraid of failure. I was afraid of my ego, was afraid of failure. When I let go of all that and all the expectations, then that's when success came through. So, there may be something you need to experience overcoming, and sometimes fear and worry and that come up. And if you trust the calling that you're having and you face that, and at the end of the day, I don't want to say your fears become realized. Like, if I would have really failed at what I was doing, I knew enough at that point where I would have went back and said, okay, Lord, I wasn't listening to you, but I know this failure serves you. So how can I do it differently next time? How can I be more attentive next time? I think people that are truly open to God and truly successful in life, successful in love, successful in finances, are ones that embrace failure and look for the lessons. They're brave enough to step into that energy they're being called to do and not to step away. I know that's what I'm currently being challenged with, is like, okay, there are safer places than running a business, but, financially, but can I stay with it? Has God called me to do this? So, hey, I trust you, Lord. I keep carrying us along. And the third item. So what would the third item that I would give you in the concept of giving and receiving? It's definitely around, well, I don't want to say it's two things, but it's the first one is, well, this is the third one, but the first part of the third one is giving it all to God. And what I mean by that is that every single thing, doorway that you have in life, every decision that you make, if you give it all to God, how do I say, then you don't have to be responsible for it. That's funny. Yeah, you don't have to be responsible for it. But if you give it all to God, with that intention first and foremost, then you could open the doorways to miracles to come through. And maybe I'll share it this way. So let's say you're dealing with a lot of things and a lot of decisions, and some of them are pretty profound in your life. Most people, it's financial. And you're being called to do this thing, and you have fear and worry and all that. and you stick with it. And the first time out, you fail. If you learn from that, you stick with it, you do again, you might fail again. But next thing you know, a miracle comes through. Let me put it more practical. Is like when I was okay failing with the business, and I actually shared that with the owners. I said, I got to be okay failing because I was playing it safe. I wasn't being bold out there. Well, what happened 6 months, 7 months after that, about um, a owner of a company contacted me that was one of the most successful companies in our industry, and he wanted to partner with us. And not that they hadn't been in contact with us before, but it came into his mind to call me, the new COO of the company, to begin to form that relationship. And he happened to be coming into the States, and he wanted to visit with me. And from that, we brokered a long-term partnership that hugely financially benefited the company. And there were all kind of things within that did it, but that to me is a miracle. That right when I was thinking, okay, I failed here. I'm not going to be able to turn this around. God brings the right support in. And there were several instances of that, actually. So the third one is just trust and give it all to God. And wherever it goes, you're going to be okay. And it's going to be, God will provide, and you're going to be okay. And it's really, truly putting him in the front seat of driving the car, and you're just trying to pay attention and listen and interact when you're called to interact, and not to carry that burden. That's my third advice. Hopefully those three were helpful. And hopefully there are other things you picked up during the show that are helpful to you too. That's all I seek, Lord, in these shows. So I want to wrap us up with prayer. Lord, Heavenly Father, open our hearts, our minds, our beings to all that is you. Guide us in our actions, in our presence, in our hearts and our voice, and our action, and how we interact with the world, that we're putting you first and foremost in all things, in our hearts, in what we seek in others. We seek their love and their relationship with you, Lord, in all times. And let that, Lord, even when I think I failed or I felt like I've turned the wrong direction, let me trust that you'll always call me back. You'll always take care. You'll always provide. You'll always take care of us, no matter how it looks to me or to any of the folks listening on this call on the outside. We give you our love, our trust, our faith, and our hope. In your name, Lord, in Jesus' name, and all that is. Amen. Well, thank you for the show today. I hope you all found this helpful, and happy 2026. I wish you all abundance and grace and your dreams to come true this year and beyond.